Hey everyone. We are definitely in what I would consider to be crunch time. For Northeast State, we are kind of in the last couple of days of regular classes, and then starting next week is finals week. Okay, so our class does not have any kind of final. Instead, we just need to make sure we're finishing up Othello and we are getting this third essay done, right? So remember, this essay will be shorter. I think it's really just like 2 to 3 pages, 500 to 750 words. But before we can do the essay, we need to make sure we finish the play. Okay. So I'm gonna still try to be as kind of like hands-on as I can, guiding you through this play. Um, but I have to be realistic. As much as I would like to, just read the whole thing for you and explain everything, we just simply don't have enough time for me to do that. Okay. So, what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to see how far I can get. So it's right now it's 6:55, so it's almost 7 o'clock on Thursday night. Um, I definitely will not be able to get through the end of the play. I might have to just make another video tomorrow to kind of wrap things up. But I will see what we can do here. So when we left the play last time, we had Othello and Senator Brab and Desdemona. Basically, all of our characters were in the Senate chamber or whatever, the Duke's chamber for the council, and they had a couple of issues going on. So, number one, obviously, Senator Brab was not very happy that he had been informed by Iago and Rodrigo that his daughter Desdemona was marrying Othello, right? So, Iago kind of instigated this plan, and then he kind of quickly leaves and goes to find Othello so he can like pretend like he's on Othello's side. When we get two groups that come up, first Michael Cassio comes up to Othello and Iago and says, "The Duke is looking for you." And then after that, quickly after, the kind of angry group comes up with Senator Brab, and he says, "Othello, I'm not very happy with you right now. You've married my daughter in secrecy, so on and so on." And keep in mind, really, Othello knows that he's a badass, right? So he does not really, he's not threatened by anyone at this point. He even tells when Senator Brab comes and they have their swords, Othello pretty much says, "Put away your swords, or the dew will rust them." He's like, "You are not threatening me. I'm not afraid of you. Put away your weapons." So anyway, they end up having to go to the Duke, the Senate's chamber, because Othello has been summoned because he has to go fight for the Venetians and go fight uh, the Ottomans in Cyprus. Okay, so they go there, and while they're in front of the Duke, Senator Brab is like, "I'm glad that we're meeting because I'm going to tell you about what Othello has done with my daughter," thinking that it's like, a very big deal and that Othello is going to get in trouble. And we get a couple of very important speeches. We get a couple of speeches from Othello where he says, "You're charging me with like enchanting and like doing spells and witchcraft to win over Desdemona." He says, "By my actions and my words, I have won her." He says, "That is the only enchanting that has been done." So basically, Othello and Desdemona herself make their case to the council, and they basically win over the council. And then they say, "Okay, Othello's like, if I have to go to Cyprus, then I also want Desdemona to come with me, right?" So basically, that part of the play ends with they get permission from the Duke for Desdemona to also come along to Cyprus to follow Othello. And Iago and Rodrigo, we kind of skipped over that part, but they kind of hatched a plan where they're going to go together. For some reason or another, Rodrigo has to wear a fake beard. I don't remember why. It might say it, but I don't remember. So anyway, long story short, all of our cast has moved from Venice to Cyprus. Okay, so the rest of the play takes place on this island of Cyprus, and that's where we're going to kind of pick up right now. Okay, so beginning Act Two, Scene One, we can kind of skip over a lot of this stuff. The only thing that is of importance here, if you've got your textbook, this is the bottom of page 1473. It says Act 2, Scene 1, a seaport in Cyprus, outdoors near a harbor. Montano. We get another character introduced here. Montano he's a minor character, but he's important in some ways. So just take note that we first get our introduction to Montano in Act 2, Scene 1. And he is there, and Michael Cassio is there. And eventually we see Desdemona is also there. So basically, they are all already in Cyprus. So if you skip over to page 1477, we see that Montano, Michael Cassio, Desdemona, Iago, and Iago's wife, Amelia, are all there already. All right. So all these characters are already in Cyprus, and they are basically standing around talking, waiting for Othello. Okay. So again, you can read that if you want to, but we basically just get some back and forth. There's not really any super important information that we get there, other than the fact that establishing all these characters are in Cyprus, but Othello's not there yet. They're waiting on Othello to get there. Okay, so Othello finally arrives. This is the bottom of page 1478, and this is important where we see it says, Enter Othello and attendants. Michael Cassio says, Lo, where he comes. Othello says, Oh, my fair warrior. But he is not referring to Michael Cassio here. He is actually referring to Desdemona. He calls Desdemona his fair warrior, right? So remember back in this time, fair meant like, beautiful, like someone who is like kind of untouched, like you have fair skin, right? Also, you can see Turbo in the background. Turbo, she has to stay in here for right now. But Othello says, "Oh, my fair warrior, Desdemona." Desdemona says, "My dear Othello." Let's stop here and read because this is important. I want you to understand that even kind of regardless of what ends up happening in this play, I want you to be aware that Othello and Desdemona do truly love each other, right? This is a true romance, and these two characters are very much in love with each other. So let's pick back up here with Othello's dialogue at the bottom of page 1478 in the textbook. So this is kind of in the middle of Act 2, Scene 1. Othello greets Desdemona. He calls her his fair warrior. Desdemona responds by saying, My dear Othello. Then Othello gives a speech right here. So let's just read this speech to see like how much he loves Desdemona, who is his wife, right? So here Othello says, It gives me wonder great as my content to see you here before me. He's referring to Desdemona. Oh, my soul's joy, if after every tempest comes such calms, tempest are, like storms on the sea. Um, if after every tempest comes such calms, may the winds blow till they have wakened death, which is just some excellent writing from Shakespeare. And let the laboring bark, which means small ship, climb hills of seas, which is just more excellent writing. Olympus high. Again, he's saying all this just to say how much he is happy to see Desdemona and how much he loves her, right? So he says a little ship should climb hills of seas that are as high as Olympus and duck again as low and fells from heaven. So it means as low as hell is from heaven. So he's just talking about riding a wave way up here and then coming back down really low, right, on the sea. If it were now to die, 'twere now to be most happy, for I fear my soul hath her content so absolute that not another comfort like this succeeds in unknown fate. He really, really, really loves Desdemona. Okay, that's what we're getting here in this speech. Desdemona responds, The heavens forbid that our loves and comforts should increase even as our days do grow, Othello responds, Amen to that, sweet powers. I cannot speak enough of this content. It stops me here. It is too much of joy. They kiss. Okay? Desdemona and Othello are madly, deeply in love with each other. So, as we go through the play, I want you to keep in mind that regardless of what ends up happening, we cannot say that these two characters do not truly love each other because they do. Okay? So let's keep going. So, 1478. Uh, so Iago sees this, right? Iago, and you notice an aside, and if you watch the clips again, the clips that I shared from that YouTube channel are like a pirated version of the movie. So they're not going to be very high quality and they're going to have the foreign subtitles, but at least you can see the play in action a little bit, right? So it says Iago aside. Aside is like where Iago turns to like speak to the audience, right? So it says Iago aside. Oh, you are well tuned now, but I'll set down the pegs that make this music as honest as I am. So if you look at, you have a footnote here. It says 5. So down at the bottom of the page 5, I'll untune by loosening the pegs that hold the strings of a musical instrument taut. So again, Iago is scheming, right? He's saying, I'm going to mess all this up a bit, basically, is what he's saying here, right? Iago's like, I can see how happy these two are, and I'm going to ruin it. That's what Iago is saying here in this aside. So they have to go. So let's see. Iago has a big, long speech here. Let's read a little bit of it. So, bottom of 1479 into 1480, we have this long speech from Iago. He's talking to Rodrigo. So it says, "Lay thy finger thus, and let thy soul be instructed. Mark me with what violence she first loved the more," which is Othello. But it says, "but" means merely for bragging and telling her fantastical lies, to love him for still prating. Let not thy discreet heart think it. Her eye must be fed, and what delight shall she have to look on the devil? When the blood is made dull with the act of sport, there should be a game to inflame it, and to give satiety a fresh appetite, loveliness and favor, sympathy in years, manners, and beauties, all which the more is defective in. Okay, so he's saying that to Rodrigo, and remember, Rodrigo is in an unrequited love with Desdemona. So Iago is now talking to Rodrigo about this, and he's saying essentially that even though Desdemona thinks she loves Othello, Iago is going to say, well, we're going to make sure she realizes that she doesn't really love Othello. That's what he's saying here, right? Now, for want of those required conveniences, her delicate tenderness will find itself abused, begin to heave the gorge, disrelish, and abhor the more. Very nature will instruct her in it and compel her to some second choice. This is very important right here, right? Where Iago says, we're going to compel Desdemona to some second choice. Again, he's referring to someone besides Othello. We're going to find out that Iago is going to make that second choice be Michael Cassio. Okay? Blah, blah, blah. So let's see if there's anything more here. Let's skip to the bottom. So we're going to kind of skip over some of this. So Iago is still talking here. This is around line 246 on page 1480. Iago says, Lechery by this hand, an index and obscure prologue to the history of lust and foul thoughts. They met so near with their lips that their breaths embraced together. Villainous thoughts, Rodrigo. When these mutabilities so marshal the way, hard at hand comes the master and main exercise, then corporate conclusion. So he's talking about flesh and physicalness. Fish, but sir, be you ruled by me. I have brought you from Venice. He's saying, we've come here from Venice, right? Watch you tonight for the command. I'll lay it upon you. Cassio knows you not. So this is important. Right now, Iago is setting up a scheme involving Rodrigo and Michael Cassio, and he's telling Rodrigo about it right now. I'll be not far from you. Do not, or do you find some occasion to anger Cassio either by speaking too loud or tainting his discipline, or from what other course you please, which the time shall be more favorably minister. So, long story short, toward the end of scene one of Act Two here, Iago is telling Rodrigo that they're going to like play a trick on Michael Cassio. Okay, so scene two, we can just skip entirely. It's whatever. It's a herald that comes in. It's just one passage here. Scene three, the citadel at Cyprus, enter Othello, Desdemona, Cassio in attendance. So here at the beginning of Act Two, Scene three, Othello is speaking to Michael Cassio. Good Michael, look at you, the guard tonight. Let's teach ourselves that honorable stop and not to outsport discretion or discretion, sorry. So, a little bit of background. So it's kind of anticlimactic. Everyone arrives in Cyprus, but the Ottomans, their ships all got destroyed by the storm at sea. Okay, so everyone from Venice arrives at Cyprus, and there's no one there to fight. All the Ottomans, their ships got destroyed by the storm. So anyway, the Venetians are here now, the Venetian army, and there's not really anyone to fight, but they're still keeping guard, right? So they have like this castle, this battlement or whatever, and they still have to keep watch. Okay, so right now, Othello, since he is the lieutenant or general, sorry, he is the general, and Michael Cassio is his lieutenant. Othello is saying, Cassio, I need you to keep guard tonight, right? So Cassio responds to Othello. He said, Iago hath direction what to do, but notwithstanding my personal eye, I'll look to it, right? Now, look what Othello says here, right? We call this dramatic irony when we, the audience, know something that the character does not know, right? So we know that Iago is not honest. Othello does not know that, okay? So right now, Othello says, Iago is most honest. Michael, good night. Tomorrow, with your earliest, let me have speech with you. He refers to Desdemona now. Come, my dear love, the purchase made, the fruits to ensue, that profit yet to come between me and you. Basically, he says, Desdemona, we're going to go to bed, if you know what I mean, right? So enter Iago. So again, Iago is setting up a plan right now. Cassio says, Welcome, Iago. We must to the watch. Look at what Iago says. Not this hour, Lieutenant, which remember, Iago is very not happy with Michael Cassio because he got that lieutenant position instead of him, right? But look at how he kind of lies to his face right here. Not this hour, Lieutenant. This is Iago. 'Tis not yet 10 o'clock. Our general cast us thus early for the love of his Desdemona, who let us not therefore blame. He hath not yet made wanton the night with her, and she is sport for Jove. Cassio, she is a most exquisite lady. Cassio needs to be careful here because remember, Iago has a plan that he is going to basically make. He's going to make Othello not trust Cassio, but then at the same time, he is going to make Michael Cassio start talking to Desdemona. Okay? So, in combination of his plan, where he is going to plant a seed of distrust inside of Othello for Cassio, at the same time, he is going to tell Cassio that he should start talking to Desdemona in order to regain Othello's trust. Okay, so he's being very, very, very manipulative right here, but not yet. I'm kind of jumping ahead, but that's what's going to happen. Okay, so look at how Iago begins this. He starts talking to Cassio about Desdemona. Cassio says, She is a most exquisite lady, Iago says, and I'll warrant her full of game, which means sexual spirit. Cassio, indeed, she is a most fresh and delicate creature. Remember, they're talking about Othello's wife right now, right? What an eye she has, methinks. It sounds parley to provocation, and Cassio says an inviting eye, and yet methinks right modest. Blah blah blah. Okay, so let's skip forward. So anyway, Iago says before we go on watch, let's start drinking. Right? He's like, let's start drinking wine. Um, so the bottom of 1483, Iago says, some wine, ho. And then he starts to sing. He says, blah, 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 a soldier's man, oh, a man's life but a span. Why then let a soldier drink? He's like, let's just get drunk. So it says, some wine, boys, right? So they start drinking. Cassio says, here is your Englishman, so exquisite in his drinking. Iago, why he drinks with you, Felicity. Dane dead drunk, he sweats not to overthrow your Almain. He gives your Hollander a vomit ere the next pedal to be filled. Blah blah blah. Right? They're just talking. Iago starts singing again. So anyway, they start drinking. Right? Cassio at the bottom of page 1484 says, "I, but by your leave, not before me. The lieutenant is to be saved before the ensign." So remember, Cassio is the lieutenant. Iago is the ensign. Right? Let's have no more of this talking about the wine. He says, let's go to our affairs. Forgive us our sins. Gentlemen, let's look to our business. Do not think, gentlemen, I am drunk. He says, this is my ensign. This is my right hand, talking about Michael Cassio. And he makes kind of a drunken joke. He says, this is my right hand. Then he goes, this is my left, right? This is my left. He wants everyone to know he is not drunk. Except the problem is he actually is drunk. But look at how he says this over again, right? He says, I am not drunk now. I can stand well enough and speak. I speak well enough. So top of 1485, Cassio, why very well, then you must not think then that I am drunk. He exits. Montano says, come, let's perform the watch. Look at what Iago does here, okay? As soon as Michael Cassio leaves. So remember, Michael Cassio is currently drunk because Iago made them all start drinking, right? So this is all part of his plan. So as soon as Michael Cassio leaves, Iago turns to Montano and says this. You see this fellow that has gone before, referring to Cassio, who just walked away. He is a soldier fit to stand by Caesar and give direction, but do see his vice. 'Tis to his virtue a just equinox, the one as long as the other. 'Tis pity of him. I fear the trust Othello puts in him. On some odd time in his infirmary, will shake this island. Basically, he's saying, did you see how drunk Michael Cassio just got and then went to stand watch? That's not cool. He shouldn't do that. But why did Cassio do that? Because Iago made them all start drinking, right? So again, just look at the levels of manipulation that are going on here. As soon as Cassio walks off, Iago basically starts talking bad about him to Montano. He's like, look at how drunk he was. He shouldn't go to watch. He's drunk. Montano says, but is he often thus? Iago responds, 'tis evermore his prologue to his sleep. He'll watch the hair log in double set, if drink rock not his cradle. So he says Cassio gets this drunk every night, right? It's his prologue to sleep. That is not true at all, right? He's completely lying right here. Montano says, it were well the general would put mind of it. He's basically saying we need to let Othello know about this, right? Perhaps he sees it not, or his good nature prizes the virtue that appears in Cassio and looks not on his evils. Is this not true? Shows up, Rodrigo shows up out of nowhere. Okay, so I'll kind of summarize this. So basically, Iago gets Michael Cassio drunk, and he's doing this to as a part of his plan, right? So his plan right now is to get Cassio drunk and then get him in trouble with Othello. Okay, so the first thing he does as soon as Cassio walks away is he tells this to Montano. Then he gets Rodrigo to basically go and stir up the drunk Michael Cassio. Okay, so you see here, Rodrigo comes in. Iago says, "How now, Rodrigo? I pray you, after the lieutenant, go." So he's like, Rodrigo, go get Michael Cassio. So Rodrigo does this. So remember the dynamic here. The old cartoon Pinky and the Brain, where Iago is the brain, Rodrigo's Pinky, right? So he's like, go get Michael Cassio. And Rodrigo's like, all right, I'll go. Um, so right here it says, enter Cassio pursuing Rodrigo. Cassio says, you rogue, you rascal. Montano, what's the matter, Lieutenant? Cassio says, a knave teach me my duty. I'll beat the knave into a twig and bottle. He's basically saying he's calling Rodrigo a knave and he's got to beat him up now, right? Rodrigo goes, beat me? I love the Shakespearean dialogue. It cracks me up. Cassio says, dost thou prate, rogue? And Montano says, nay, good lieutenant, trying to calm Michael Cassio down. He says, I pray you, sir, hold your hand. Cassio says, let me go, sir, or I'll knock you or your mazzard. Montano says, come, come, you're drunk. Cassio goes, drunk? And they start to fight. So basically, Cassio is in a fighting mood now that he's drunk. So he kind of beats up Rodrigo and he strikes Montana. Okay. So Iago says aside to Rodrigo, away I say, go out and cry a mutiny. So again, Iago is manipulating all this, right? He is like the puppet master with his strings. Okay. So he says, go. Iago tells Rodrigo to go and start crying mutiny. So it says, exit Rodrigo. Now they're trying to calm down the drunk Michael Cassio. It gets a little bit out of hand. Michael Cassio ends up stabbing Montano, not fatally. He survives, but it does get a little bit out of hand. Long story short, Othello has to show up and settle everything down. Okay. So again, I'm gonna summarize all this instead of reading it. So what happens here is that Othello comes onto the scene, right? He was kind of like in his bedchamber with Desdemona, but Rodrigo starts crying, mutiny, like shouting. So Othello has to come and settle everything down. Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, by this point, things have gotten a little bit out of hand, and Cassio has already stabbed Montano. Not very much on purpose. He just got very caught up in the moment and drunkenly stabs Montano. Okay. So that's important to know, though. Okay. So this all happens, and long story short, Othello comes out and says, someone tell me what's happened. Michael Cassio, at this point, refuses to speak, okay, because he knows he's in trouble, right? So, Michael Cassio does not say anything. So, uh, Othello goes over to Montano and says, Montano, tell me what happened. Montano says, I would tell you, but I just got stabbed in the stomach. I don't want to talk right now. So he doesn't get any information from Cassio. He doesn't get any information from Montano. So he goes to ask um, Iago. Okay, so this is the bottom of 1478. Iago, or Montano to Iago. Montano says to Iago, if partially affined or league in office, thou dost deliver more or less than truth, thou art no soldier. Okay? So right now, Montano is telling Iago, you need to tell the truth to Othello. Let's see what Iago does. Iago responds, this is the bottom of 1478. Touch me not so near. I had rather this tongue cut from my mouth than it should do offense to Michael Cassio. Again, pardon my language, but we need to think of how full of shit Iago is. Think about that as you're reading this speech. Um, he says, touch me not so near. I'd rather have this tongue cut from my mouth than it should do offense to Michael Cassio. Yet I persuade myself to speak the truth shall nothing wrong him. Okay? Iago is such a slippery little bastard, okay? He's saying, remember, he is the one who instigated this entire plan. He caused all this to happen. And now he is the one who has to tell Othello what happened, okay? Look at what he says. He says, I will speak the truth if nothing bad happens to Michael Cassio. That's what he's saying here. It says that This is it, General. Again, referring to Othello, who is the general. Montano and myself being in speech, here comes Othello crying out for help, and Cassio following him with determined sword to execute upon him, sir. This gentleman, it says, sir, this gentleman, indicating Montano, steps into Michael Cassio and entreats his pause. Myself the crying fellow did pursue, lest by his clamor, as it so fell out, the town might fall in fright. He, swift of foot, outran my purpose, and returned then rather for that. I heard the clink and the fall of swords, and Cassio high an oath, till which tonight I ne'er might say before. When I came back, for this was brief, I found them close together at blow and thrust, even as again they were when you yourself did part them. So he is kind of telling the truth, but not telling the entire truth. Remember, the person that was swift of foot was Rodrigo. Rodrigo set upon Michael Cassio at Iago's request. So he's telling the truth, but not entirely, right? He's being very slippery right here. And he's saying when he came on the scene, uh, Montano and Cassio were entangled, and Othello was the one who got them separated. Where he says right here, "When yourself did part them." More of this matter I cannot report, which is definitely a lie. He could say a lot more, but he's not going to. Right? He's not really going to tell the truth. He's lying. Right? He's lying. But men are men, the best sometimes forget. Though Cassio did some little wrong to him, as men in rage strike those that wish them best, yet surely Cassio, I believe, received from him that fled some strange indignity which patience could not pass. Okay? Long story short, Desdemona comes out. She says, "What's the matter?" Um, Othello says, all's well, sweeting, come away to bed." Long story short, what happens here is, as punishment, Othello strips Michael Cassio of his rank of lieutenant. Okay, if you watch the clip from the movie, he actually slaps the shit out of him. Sorry again for my language. He slaps Michael Cassio very hard to make an example, and then takes off his lieutenant sash. Okay, he says, for me to be a good general, I have to make an example out of you, right? For this behavior, right? And he kind of says nothing personal, but I'm doing this in order to like show that I'm a strong leader, right? Okay, so all that dies down, and Iago is left by himself with Michael Cassio. This is probably the last part I'm going to read for tonight, but I want you to see what happens here, right? So all of this happens. So basically, Iago created this plan, and as a result, he essentially got Michael Cassio stripped of his rank of lieutenant. So see how this plan is kind of going into motion. Okay. So step one, he has caused he has give reason for Othello to not trust Michael Cassio, right? But this is all set up by Iago. This is all part of his plan. Look at how he responds. So this is the bottom of page 1488. Okay, it says exit all except for Iago and Cassio. Okay, Iago says, "What? Are you hurt, Lieutenant?" Look at how Iago plays dumb right here. He plays so dumb right here. He knows exactly what's happened because he's the one who caused all of it to happen. But look at how he plays dumb and how he interacts with Cassio after this very troubling thing has happened to Cassio. Right? He says, "What? Are you hurt, Lieutenant?" Cassio replies, "I past all surgery." A very overdramatic response. He says, "I am so hurt that there's no surgery that can fix it." Right? Iago responds, very kind of like smart ass, right? He says, "Mary, heaven forbid." Cassio, "Reputation, reputation, reputation. Oh, I have lost my reputation. I have lost the immortal part of myself, and what remains is bestial," right? My reputation, Iago, my reputation. Look at what Iago says. As I am an honest man, I would have thought you received some bodily wound. There is more sense in that than in reputation. We call this gaslighting, right? This day and age, we call this is gaslighting behavior. He is very much gaslighting Cassio right now. He says reputation is an idle and most false imposition, oft got without merit and lost without deserving. You have lost no reputation at all unless you report yourself such a loser. I kind of actually like that line a little bit. I can agree with that slightly, even though Iago's being a complete POS right now. What man? Are there more ways to recover the general again? Talking about Othello. You are, but now cast in his mood. It says you were dismissed in anger, right? Punishment more in policy than in malice. Even so, as one would beat his offenseless dog to affright an imperious lion, do to him again, and he's yours. He's saying, just go and talk to Othello, right? And you can iron all this out. Cassio says, I will rather sue to be despised than to deceive so good commander with slight, or with so slight, so drunken, and so indiscreet an officer. Drunk and speak parrot, it says rant on, right? And squabble, swagger, seer, and discourse fustian with one's own shadow. O invisible spirit of wine, if thou hast no name to be known by, let us call thee devil. He's like, I made a very stupid drunk mistake, and I lost my position because of it, right? Iago responds, uh what was he that followed you with your sword? What he had he done to you? Again, Iago knows exactly what happened because he's the one who sent Rodrigo after Michael Cassio to begin with. Cassio says, I know not. Is it possible? Iago responds. Cassio says, I remember a mass of things, but nothing distinctly, a quarrel, but nothing wherefore. Oh, that men should put an enemy in their mouths to steal away their brains. He's talking about alcohol. That we should with joy, pleasance, revel, and applaud, transform ourselves into beasts. He's talking about being drunk and being stupid. Iago says, why? Well, you are now well enough. How came you thus recovered? He's like, you seem fine now, even though you were drunk earlier. Um, Cassio says, it has pleased the devil drunkenness to give place to the devil wrath. One imperfectness shows me another, and it makes me frankly despise myself. Iago says, come, you are too severe a moraler. He says, you moralize things too much, which is very ironic coming from Iago, right? As the time, the place, and the condition of this country stands, I could hardly wish this had not befallen. But since it is as it is, mend for your own good. Cassio says, I will ask him for my place again. He says, I'll ask for my rank back. He shall tell me I am a drunkard. He says, if I do ask, then Othello will say, I can't give it to you. You're a drunkard, right? And as many months as Hydra as should answer would stop them all. To be now a sensible man and by a fool, presently a beast, how strange. Every inordinate cup is unblessed, and an ingredient is a devil. Iago responds, come, come. Good wine is a good familiar creature, if it be well used. Exclaim no more against it. And good lieutenant, um, I think you think I love you. He's being so manipulative right here. He's like, Cassio, you know I love you. You know I love you. We're good, right? Even though Iago is the reason all of this has just happened to Cassio. Cassio responds, this is the bottom of 1489. I have well approved it, sir. I, drunk. Iago says, you or any man living may be drunk at a time. I will tell you what you shall do. Our general's wife is now the general. What is he doing here? Think about it, right? So Othello now thinks not very highly of Michael Cassio because of Iago's plan. And Cassio is saying, in order to fix this, you should start talking to Desdemona. You should start talking to Othello's wife. That'll get you back in with Othello, right? He says, our general's wife is now the general. I may say so in this respect, for that he hath devoted and given up so much to contemplation, mark, and devotement of her parts and graces. Confess yourself freely to her. This is not good, right? He says, just talk freely to Desdemona. I'm sure Othello won't mind, right? He says, confess yourself freely to her, and important to her to put in your place again. She is of so free, so kind, so apt, so blessed a disposition, she holds it a vice in her goodness not to do more than she is requested. This broken joint between you and her husband entreat her to splinter, and for fortunes against any lay worth naming, the crack of your love shall grow stronger than it was before. He's saying Desdemona will put you back in good with Othello. Just go talk to her, is what he's saying. Cassio, this is one of the most ironic lines in the entire play. This is line 301 on page 1490. Cassio looks at Iago and says, you advise me well. Iago is not advising him well right now. Iago says, I protest in the sincerity of love and honest kindness. He says, protest here means insist, so I insist. In the sincerity of love and honest kindness, Iago is being anything but honest right now. So let's skip ahead. I'm going to stop here. This is kind of the last important speech Iago gives for Act 3, Scene 1. So right here, Iago says, and what's he then? Sorry, let me start over. Iago, this is line 309. And what's he then that says I play the villain? This is Iago kind of talking to the audience directly right now. What's he then that says I play the villain? And this advice is free I give, and honest, probable to thinking, and indeed the courts to win the more again. For 'tis most easy the inclining Desdemona to subdue in any honest suit. He's framed as fruitful as the free elements, then and then for her to win the more, or to renounce his baptism, all seals and symbols of redeemed sin, his soul is so enfettered to her love that she may make, unmake, and do what she list, even as her appetite shall play the god with his weak function. This is very ominous what he's saying right here. He's basically saying that Desdemona has Othello so wrapped up within her that it makes Othello an easy target because of that, is what he's saying here, right? This is very important. He goes on to say, how am I then a villain? This is Iago talking to the audience. How then am I a villain to counsel Cassio to this parallel course directly to his good? Divinity of hell, when devils will the blackest sins put on, they do suggest at first with heavenly shows, as I do now. For whilst this honest fool plies Desdemona to repair his fortune, he calls Michael Cassio here an honest fool for believing him, essentially, right? He calls Michael Cassio an honest fool. For while this honest fool plies Desdemona to repair his fortune, and she pleads for and she for him pleads strongly to the more, I'll pour this pestilence into his ear, that she repeals him for her body's lust, and by how much she strives to do him good, he shall undo her credit with the more. So I will turn her virtue into pitch. That means I'll turn her virtue into blackness, right? And out of her own goodness make the net that shall enmesh them all. Okay? So basically, right then and there, Iago just gave like his villainous monologue, right? And you notice how twice inside of that monologue he says, how am I a villain? how am I a villain? All I'm doing is this, this, and this. Does that make me a villain? Think about that, right? Okay. So this video is right at 45 minutes long. I'm going to go ahead and stop it for right now and upload this. So I will post some more tomorrow. Again, as much as possible, I want us to finish up the play this week, which we only have tomorrow left to do that. If I have to work into Saturday, I will. But my game plan is to have the play done by this week, and then just all of next week you will spend writing your essay. All right, you'll have from hopefully we'll finish the play either tomorrow, or if I have to carry it over into Saturday, we'll do that. But you'll have hopefully from this coming weekend or this weekend through Friday of next week to write your essay. Okay. And again, I know we're right up to the wire, but I think as soon as we finish the play, hopefully you can write a 2 to 3 page essay within a week. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this video for now and get it uploaded. And hopefully we can get this play finished within the next couple of days so you can just focus on finishing your essay. All right. Again, you do not have to wait on me to do these updates. If you feel like you're okay with working with Othello on your own, you do not have to wait for my updates, right? If you want to go ahead and get started, you can. Please email me if you have any questions or concerns, and I will see you in the next update.